Hello and welcome to this episode of Akrinos Access. I'm your host, Eric Matei, joined today by Amanda Collaso for a fascinating conversation around modern bookkeeping for optometry. Amanda, hello, welcome to Akrinos Access.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm
Well,
excited.
hey, thank you so much for joining us. This is definitely a timely conversation as we're seeing so many doctors getting into practice ownership. And as we all know, balanced books is the backbone of so many facets of the practice, right? Whether it's analyzing production of the practice, strategic planning, and certainly in determining the valuation of the practice, which is critical at any stage of the practice life cycle. So, Amanda, I know we got a ton of things to jump into here. So why don't we go ahead and take it from the top and maybe just start by defining bookkeeping. I mean, what is bookkeeping exactly, and why is it so important?
Yeah, simply put, bookkeeping is just, kind of processing and recording all of your transactions coming in and out. It kind of helps you organize all of your money, see it at, higher level. Just making sure that everything that you're spending and everything you're getting is accounted for. So pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty simple and yet kind of complex. And I don't know if it's.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. What's that?
Simple explanation, complex situation. Right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's because, let's face it, in the day-to-day of many businesses, there are so many moving parts. There is so much money coming in and out that although it does seem rather simple, it's a lot to see after. And it is absolutely imperative that there's structure around it and that there's consistency around all the occurrences as well with it. So why don't you kind of share with us a little bit about, let's talk about just the bookkeeping process. What are the elements of it? Kind of what does that look like?
Yeah. The elements of bookkeeping, first and foremost, and what you end up doing the most, I feel like, is sitting in your bank feed, going through all of your transactions, making sure that all of your money that you've brought in for the month is being accounted for, properly kind of categorizing and coding your transactions to make sure that not only are you getting proper, IRS tax deductions and tracking those things because that's a requirement, but also just seeing where your money is going and knowing how to move forward with those, with that knowledge. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're just sitting reconciling. So reconciliation, just essentially ensuring that everything that you're accounting for, all of those transactions that we're coding, are actually properly being recorded. So not any double entries on income, because then you'd be paying taxes on twice the income. No double expenses, because then that's fraudulent. So yeah. Kind of going through and making sure that your books are good. And it's not always a priority for all ODs because they're really busy. And so, yeah, I often see it kind of being the last thought in a lot of practices.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little about some of the unique aspects of bookkeeping for optometry, right? And what I mean by that is that while there are some elements that are, the overall structure of bookkeeping is going to be the same across different businesses, but what are some of those intricacies of modern optometry that make for kind of a unique bookkeeping situation?
Yeah, you're right. So we have bookkeeping overall is supposed to be pretty structured. Like I said, IRS wants us to do that. But when it comes to optometry, the unique aspects are going to be things like considering that retail is involved, healthcare is involved. It's much different than if you were doing bookkeeping for, a primary physician, because you're also selling glasses, you're buying different pieces of technology, which, often is, we see so many new pieces of technology coming in and out. So those three aspects, technology, retail, healthcare, kind of create this unique sphere of bookkeeping within the optometric field. Yeah. So I think that's why I like it the most. It's kind of this interesting puzzle to put together. I like that.
Yeah. And then certainly I think the role of managed care as well, right? Particularly like managed care and the role of labs with adjustments and chargebacks. And again, I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things that for someone who's unfamiliar with optometric chart of accounts and just with practice economics and how this world works, it can be rather cumbersome, right? So let's talk a little bit further about structuring Cadence. So maybe walk us through, how do you structure that chart of accounts, tips and best practices and stuff like that. And then from there, maybe share with us a little bit about the ins and outs of some good, solid housekeeping and reconciliation on that.
Yeah. So as far as chart of accounts goes, oftentimes if you were to start a new QuickBooks account, you're going to see a chart of accounts that's already in there. And it's like maybe for a landscaping company, maybe for an e-commerce company, but it's definitely not reflective of the business that any practice does for optometry. So we kind of like to separate it into categories and subcategories so that you're able to see, how much when you're glancing very quickly, how much am I spending in occupancy? How much am I spending for my staff? Making sure that staff is separated from your associate doctors, because those are two totally different aspects of payroll. We need one for different reasons than we need the other. And, making sure also that if you have contractors, that's also considered. It's often considered a cost of good. So making sure all of those things make sense. I also like different categories like staff expenses. So making sure that uniforms are accounted for and different fees like that. And then making sure, also taking out all of those owner expenses and making sure those aren't reflected when you're looking at your finances. So then with that really good structured chart of accounts, going through, and depending on if you're doing your books yourself or you have your CPA's bookkeeper do it, which is often the case, you still need some sort of schedule, some sort of reoccurring task that you give yourself every week, every month, to make sure that your receipts are turned in or you're accounting for those, making sure if you're doing it yourself that you're regularly entering those transactions. Because when you get in there and you're seeing 120 transactions, you're just like, it's so easy to be like, I don't even want to do this. Please don't make me do this.
Click.
Yeah. And it really can be simple if you get in the habit, but then reconciling those accounts monthly, which is very important. Like I said, I don't know how many times I've seen, clients taking care of their own books and not reconciling, and they've, accounted for twice the income in some situations. You don't want to do that. Not overall, but like I just found one that was $20,000, and you're like, you just paid taxes on $20,000 more income. So having to do that amendment and figuring that out is just a waste of time and energy and, things like that. So getting a rhythm, making sure you have a schedule, making sure you stay on top of it, whether like I said, you're doing it yourself or you're giving it to someone else, because even if you're hiring it out, your time is so much more saved by doing that, but you still need to spend that time. Otherwise, what's the point?
Sure. Yeah. It's fascinating what you said. Now I'm noticing also as I had a comment here, Nate Banks, so he's a banker. Actually, Nate and I, we've collaborated on a few projects here recently. And Nate comments, bookkeeping critical in knowing and making sure the practice is profitable, right? And to your point, Amanda, and I know certainly the work that we see in the work we do with Akrinos is that having those books in order, clean books, can allow for really good P&L insights, right? To kind of inform that strategy moving forward, be able to see how the practice aligns with certain benchmarks, right? Whether it's on the expense side or also likewise on the production side, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating also when we look at the times we live in, where we can look at how, good balanced books, QuickBooks reporting can match up with good valid practice analytics, right? Out of say like Edge Pro dashboards and stuff like that, and see the corollaries there can really inform strategy moving forward for practices, really regardless of what the goals are, right? Whether that's to cut costs, grow top line, or ultimately do both, right? In a sustainable manner. So really great stuff there. And it all centers around that chart of accounts as well. You had another thought there, Amanda?
I did. Yeah. When you're looking at it, you can do bookkeeping two different ways. You can do it to be tax compliant, make sure that the government is, happy. but you can also do it to make sure that you're be able to manage your business. And so managerial bookkeeping is kind of where I shine. I like to make sure that that chart of accounts is set up so that we can make those decisions. So you can track what is my expense ratio? How much money am I spending versus how much am I making? Am I, paying my staff way more than I should? What's the average? Like you said, what's the benchmark on that? Am I paying my staff, 35% of my income when my goal is 27%? How do you know unless you're separating on those fees and making sure that that's reflected on that P&L,
Yeah.
things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There were some other thoughts you had mentioned earlier also when you were talking about the chart of accounts, the importance of having a good, strong, modern optometric chart of accounts, but also being sure that you're staying on top of reconciling it. And that is as applies to practice valuation, right? Because depending on how that money is showing up on the financial statements, can have a radical swing in exactly how that valuation comes back. And viewers, if y'all want to learn more on that, we've actually got some great resources there in the Akrinos Access Resource Center, specifically around Practice Valuations 101. So check it out if you want to learn more on that front. So Amanda, so we're talking about balance books. So it starts with, if I'm hearing you right, for our viewers to take home, that it's going to start with that chart of accounts, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't have that chart of accounts mapped accurately, it doesn't matter how frequently you're reconciling and updating that, because it's going to be allocated. It's going to be allocated in a suboptimal manner, I suppose we'll say. So it starts with that chart of accounts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And from there, then we're talking about the action, right? The act of reconciling. I mean, unfortunately, bookkeeping is one of those things where, while there are elements of it that can be set it and forget it, unfortunately, you do have to go in and reconcile these books. So why don't you share with our viewers a few of the, some of these key considerations for maintaining balanced books, where to start. If you've discovered your books are kind of in disarray, how do you clean them up, and how do you maintain balanced books?
Yeah. I mean, starting with how to have balanced books is depending on where you start. Like you said, if you're starting with messy books, that's a whole different process. Cleaning up really starts with seeing where you are, kind of addressing where you sit with your organization. First, like I said, chart of accounts is always going to be where I start personally. And then pulling like a trial balance sheet, making sure that your assets aren't negative, because that makes no sense. Making sure that your liabilities aren't positive in turn also makes no sense, but there are a few nuances there. But yeah, so making sure that those things make sense, but that's not always going to be reflective. That can be perfect, but your books are still a mess. Then going through and checking, when's the last time my books were reconciled? Have I ever reconciled my books? Has my CPA ever reconciled my books? Which surprisingly often doesn't happen. So yeah, making sure that, like I said, chart of accounts is set up. You're then, all of your kind of P&L and your balance sheet make a little bit of sense, and then going through making sure you're reconciled. And then from there, you kind of go and clean up, like making sure that everything, it's very easy when you're looking at something like software. Where would I put that? Do I put it in, office fees? And so oftentimes I know that we get a little bit excited about new software. So I really try to pull that separate out and making sure, but I feel like then oftentimes so many doctors forget where they put it last time. Oh yeah, my weave. Did I put it in
Right.
software? Did I put it in telephone? Did I put in what am I doing with this? So making sure that that's consistent, making sure you kind of have a quality control process as you're going through and seeing that everything is the same. Because then if you're putting, like I said, we'll use weave as an example. If you're putting that software 1 month and then next month you're putting it in internet and phone bill, you're going to be looking at your reports, and oftentimes you want to look side by side, whether it's the previous month, but most likely the previous year. Does that make any sense? Like, why did that bill jump down? Why is my software suddenly $700 lower? And so you want to be able to make those decisions, but if you're not properly recording and making sure that you're being consistent, you really can't. Yeah,
Right.
It's too all over the map. So yeah, going through and cleaning all of that up, making sure everything looks good. It's quite a process. If you let it get out of control, it can be quite a process.
So when we hear the term that, or when we understand the books are not clean, I guess we'll say they're dirty books. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's illegality going on with the books. It
No,
simply means that there's some disorganization, the likes of which, again, there's not necessarily any sort of tax compliance um, exposure. However, from the standpoint of being able to have a clear understanding of the inner workings of the business, that's what's in
exactly.
disarray. So in cleaning up
Exactly.
the books, getting everything in that chart of accounts and consistency month to month, year to year can better inform, it can better reflect the true economics of the practice. So what we're
Perfect. Yeah.
truly getting at, right? So now let's talk a little bit about reconciliation, right? So
Mhm.
for those out there that perhaps have always like just had whoever in their CPA office do it, and perhaps now they've kind of discovered coming out of viewing this, they're going to discover, oh my gosh, my books aren't being balanced. Um,
Yes.
why don't you share with for for those that are the do-it-yourselfers out there, how do you reconcile your accounts?
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, I recommend doing it monthly. So then you're not, once again, cleaning up historical data, but going through, taking each account, so each bank account as you go, starting there. Oh, I'm starting with my checking account, pulling that statement, making sure that all of that adds up, and then making sure at the end the balance is zero. So everything that's on your statement is also everything that's on your bank feed, and everything equals to zero. Now, oftentimes, because technology is not perfect, QuickBooks pulls in something twice, doesn't pull in something at all. So that's kind of that situation where you're going to be able to find those mistakes, whether they're your own or QuickBooks or whatever accounting software you're using, and making sure that those are accounted for. And then you go through, you do that for every account. Oftentimes, I see a lot of credit cards not being done for some reason, but checking and savings. Um, every single account, money market account, savings account, checking, and then going through and loan accounts as well need to be reconciled, so that you make sure that when you're looking at your balance sheet at the end of the month, you can see properly how much money you actually owe to this company, and it's not taking out the interest payment as well from that overall balance that you owe. So yeah, reconciling all of those accounts will really reflect more accurate numbers on your P&L and your balance sheet. But yeah, making sure everything is zeroed out essentially. It's like back in the day when they use a check register, doing your check register at the end of the month. So
Yeah, just
back in the day.
in QuickBooks.
Yeah, yep, exactly. A little bit easier, a little bit funner, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. 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 The user experience is kind of cool.
Yeah,
It's um,
it's a little
but
simpler.
regardless, I mean, I think. By the way, this has been a tremendously insightful conversation because there are a lot of intricacies. For starters, there's a lot of intricacies to modern bookkeeping, like bookkeeping for modern optometry, right?
Mhm.
Given again the role of managed care, the role of labs and adjustments and chargebacks, many things that we want to be sure are properly being accounted for. Also, you mentioned the consistency, so absolutely vital, so that we can truly get a good proper understanding of the exact economics of the practice. And then ultimately, it all ties back to the fact that there is going to be some work to do, right? And that is there is the need to reconcile even after that perfect chart of accounts is set up. Still imperative that that's being overseen and reconciled proactively, right? So,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Amanda, this has been a marvelous conversation here as we've been talking about bookkeeping for modern optometry. As we're kind of wrapping things up, why don't you share with folks, well, for starters, a little bit about your background, the work you all do
Mhm.
at Bookkeeping for Optometry, and then how folks can get in touch with you.
Yeah, yeah. So my background is in optometry. I think wore a lot of hats in the same practice for 14 years. So kind of know the ins and outs of everything except optician work, because nobody wants me touching their glasses. I know that's the only thing, but everything else, any managerial things, billing and coding, things like that. So I feel like it really gave me a good background, especially working for a very business minded optometrist, and then also doing freelance bookkeeping on my own. So on the side, always doing books. We owned our own company, my husband and I, for a while, and we did our own books. And kind of combining those two things has created this company that I love and really is my passion project because, like I said, I do genuinely love optometry. I like that it's retail. I like that it's healthcare. I like that it's just a little bit more complex than basic bookkeeping, and it's where my heart is. I love seeing private practices thrive. I love being able to help them make those decisions and grow their practice. I like watching our advice and tool set help them make those decisions that grow practices that they're proud of, grow practices that are obviously lucrative. And so, yeah, that's our background. My team really is great at. We have few members of our team have optometry backgrounds, so it really helps
Fantastic.
us know. And so we don't have to clarify everything all of the time, as you may with your CPA. We know what Optos is. We know what
Sure.
ABB
Yeah.
is. So that makes it a little simpler, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. How can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can reach my team at support@bookkeepingforoptometry.com or on our website. I really like to strategize with practice owners and even consultants and coaches in the optometric world, even with no obligation. I just like talking and saying like, hey, what are your problems right now? What are you seeing? What do you want to focus on? How can you focus on that? Even if there's no benefit to my practice, I really, like I said, enjoy speaking optometry with other professionals. So
Fantastic. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us here on Akrinos Access for what's been a fascinating, insightful conversation all around modern bookkeeping for optometry. If you wanted to connect with Amanda and continue the conversation, you can reach out to her at bookkeepingforoptometry.com. Amanda, also, I know you're very active in LinkedIn. By the way, viewers across the land, if you're not yet in LinkedIn, you got to get in LinkedIn. That's where all the really great conversation around modern practice management and business solutions is going down. So on behalf of our entire team here at Akrinos, be sure to find more great practice management resources and business solutions like this at akrinos.com. Follow us across the socials and subscribe to the Akrinos YouTube channel. And between now and next time, Eric Matei signing off for Akrinos Access.